When I was an exchange student in Japan back in 2013, everyone here told me that Instagram would fail. Japan is different, they said. A foreign fad will just not stick. And a few years later, just like with the iPhone, Instagram had conquered the whole country. You see, there's a myth you constantly hear about Japan, and that is that Japan is living in the future. And I get it. The trains are magic, and Tokyo looks like a sci-fi movie. But that is dangerously thin when you look into the society. The data shows a country that isn't ahead, but a country that's profoundly stuck. In 2022, South Korea was nearly 100% cashless. Japan, 36%. And faxes are still the normal part of businesses here, with over 90% of people using faxes every month. My theory is this: Japan is stuck, roughly 20 years in the past. And this isn't an accident. It is by design. This lag is a direct result of a brutal, expensive war waged by its biggest companies to preserve a world that no longer exists. They are fighting to protect the year 2005. And the cost of this war is the country's future. Here's the evidence from the 4 main battlefields. Battlefield 1, the retail war. For the past 20 years, the story of global retail has been Amazon's total victory. By all rights, Japan's iconic electronic stores like Yodobashi Camera or Big Camera should be dead, but they're not. Their survival has been a masterclass in resistance. They do price matching with everything on Amazon. They've turned their stores into multi-story wonderlands, and they locked in customers with powerful point card ecosystems. But this war to preserve the brick-and-mortar past is bleeding them dry, and their profit margins have been crushed, hovering at a razor-thin 1%. The walls are cracking. Yamada Denki is closing dozens and dozens of stores, and they're pivoting to selling other things like alcohol, furniture, and even home renovations. So as you see, this isn't a victory. This is just a strategic retreat paid with mountains of cash. They have not beaten Amazon. They've just managed to slow it down at an enormous cost, keeping a piece of Japan's economy frozen in time while the financial foundation melts away beneath them. Battlefield 2, the bank war. For decades, Japan's mega banks were untouchable fortresses, milking customers dry for fees in the cash-obsessed society that is Japan. But then came PayPay. Its success was stunning. This payment app that uses QR code was smooth, modern, and simple. It was everything the bank's clanky pre-smartphone era apps were not. And the bank's counterattack was pathetic. They spent billions to build their own PayPay killer apps that were dead on arrival. And when they failed, they had to surrender instead of trying to build something new because they were too late in the game. You see, in May of this year, the megabank SMBC announced a deep partnership with PayPay. In essence, they let a tech company become their front end for their own banking service. They spent a fortune not to innovate, but to build a defensive wall around their profitable past. And in doing so, they gave up the front lines in the war for the future of money. I think this is just the start of what we see in Japanese banking. Battlefield 3, the transportation stalemate. Nowhere is this fight against the future clearer than in transportation. Japan has a massive taxi driver shortage. The average driver is over 60 years old.
Hi, I am Sato. This is Japanese taxi.
And it's a perfect market for a disruptor like Uber. But when Uber arrived, it hit a brick wall of political power. The taxi industry, a very powerful cartel here, won. They lobbied for a ride-sharing system that is a complete farce. All operations are controlled by the existing taxi companies. They just use the private drivers as cheaper labor without facing any real competition. It's a system designed to keep the entire industry frozen in the 1990s. This political victory is an economic dead end. The driver shortage is getting worse, and consumers are paying some of the highest taxi fares in the developed world. The tax cartel won by using political power to literally halt the clock. But the economic pressure is building, and this dam will break as less and less taxi drivers will be there. The final domino is sadly politics. This pattern, this fierce, costly resistance that only delays the inevitable, is now playing out in the Japanese political system. For decades, Japan seemed immune to the wave of right-wing populism that swept the West 10 to 15 years ago. But the same pressures are here. They're just on a delay. Economic anxiety has fueled the dramatic rise of populist Sanseito Party in July 2025, and the long-ruling LDP, the party that's been basically ruling Japan for 70 years, they're doing exactly what we saw in the West when conservative parties were hit with a right-wing era, shifting right and co-opting the language of the populists. They are getting stuck in the exact same political trap, just on a different timeline. This is the final domino. The conclusion here is, I think, unavoidable. It's a story of Japan today. It's a story of a nation that's fighting a brilliantly expensive and ultimately losing battle to remain 20 years in the past. But I don't think you can fight a war against time. Instead, what we'll see Japanese companies do is the same mistakes as companies did in the West when they started disappearing. We'll see political people do the same mistakes as people in the West did when they became irrelevant and more right-wing party took power. Japan needs to learn from their mistakes instead of making them over again by looking at the West, not trying to bring their own way forward just to make the same mistakes as we've seen time and time again from 2005 to now. Please, Japan, learn from the West and figure out a way to make your companies and your political power more strong and more laid into the future.